By DonleyAuctions.com. Get top dollar for guns and military items. DonleyAuctions.com.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government with a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other. He's Sean Thompson, and this is the Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
You've heard the old joke. New York invented political corruption. New Jersey perfected it. And Chicago made it an art form. Well, Chicago's little stepbrother in the legacy of Democrat mafia control could be Philadelphia. I have had the pleasure of meeting just one Philadelphia radio host. His name is Chris Stegall. He was a wonderful guy. My next guest, however, is the first teacher to become a talk show host, 1987. He went on to be mentioned by Talkers Magazine, named one of the top 100 most influential talk show hosts in America, where he held that for more than 6 years. He now is launching a new podcast called Old School, New School, Next School with Dom Giordano. Dom, how are you?
Well, very good, Sean. Thank you for that great introduction. I'm a friend of Chris, know him well. And one other thing, I think we can contend with you in Chicago. The last Republican mayor in Philadelphia was alive for 3 years while Billy the Kid roamed the earth. That's how far back you got to go to find a Republican. Yeah.
Well, ours is more interesting, and ours is the Capone brothers knew that if they could back the Republicans, they could implement everything from organized labor extortion mafias called unions and trucking. They could handle it all, and they could legitimize and cover up for their real movement, which was dope and liquor. So they put a front in by the name, who's got my last name. His name was Bill Thompson. He was as shady as a willow tree and twice as crooked as Grand Avenue. But he served the purpose. He gave a little respite from Democrats, but he was still a gangster. And that's really what happens is you cultivate the community to accept that. And that's why Chicago, to this day, we lead in corruption. It's like one a week out of Illinois. One politician a week gets indicted. It's absolutely beautiful, but it also shows the erosion of the intellect of society. And that's kind of where you come in. You're trying and fighting to change that. And I love what you're doing with the podcast focusing on school choice and the next evolution in school. And I'm curious to know what you think that's going to be.
Well, the next evolution is it's never been hotter for all forms of school choice. And I'll go to Illinois, for example, where you have a presidential contender, well, the governor. The big, beautiful bill has a provision in there with billions of dollars, Sean, none of it related to taking away from public schools. In 2026, each governor has to determine, will they accept the money? Our guy, Josh Shapiro, contender for president, the bet is he won't. Even though this money would help kids in the inner city, et cetera, even though some of it goes back to public schools. So your guy, Pritzker, will be on the clock also. This has happened because of COVID. It's happening incrementally, and it's about ready to burst. We're talking homeschooling. We're talking cyber schooling, charter schools, which are huge. Sean, just recently in the last month in New York, 15,000 kids and parents marched across the Brooklyn Bridge in protest of Mondani and what he may do. And the featured speaker was Common, the rapper, who is an owner and a big proponent of charter schools, as is Pitbull, Andre Agassi, and Jalen Rose. So it's exploding all around us. To me, it is the biggest thing that would change America, other than presidential level and all that, for parents and kids.
Well, you know, Dom, it's interesting, right? Because what you're witnessing is the collapse of the character and the collapse of the intellect of the American. That's really what we're living in right now. And if you look at these Democrat areas, if you look at it from the perspective of the scoundrel, of the scallywag, it's perfect, right? Because Chicago, 18 out of 100 kids can read. 18 out of 100 kids can read. Less can do math. But if you're going to keep perpetrating this mafia, you cannot afford to have a society that can read and do math, number one. Number two, Chicagoans are paying an unbelievable $32,000 per head, whether it's a citizen, a non-citizen. All they need is a head count, and the money is in perpetuity. I have long believed, when you watch the Chicago Public Teachers Union come on television and argue for their contracts, I don't think the teachers can read or do math. That's another problem we have in these Democrat enclaves.
Well, Sean, let me tell you, I envy you for one thing. The Philadelphia public school teachers are horrible. But boy, I wish I were in Chicago occasionally. You have, by my vote, and this is my passion, my side thing, I'm a former teacher, I think the most thuggish, the most out-of-control teachers union in the country. You are the winner there, and you're the benefactor for your show.
Well, here's the other side of the coin. I have been thinking for many years now, and I worked my ass off. My wife worked, and we sent our kids to a parochial school because 20 years ago, it was a system of terrible, and everybody knew it, even though it was half the cost. And the reason I have this job, I used to call into radio shows, and I would call in and I would yell and I would point out the stupidity of what the topic was, and people started to say, "Well, why don't you come out?" And I was invited to be a judge to listen to kids argue politics at the time, and I did not realize at the time, because I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." It was homeschooling kids that were going to argue the Electoral College topic. Okay, so now these kids come out, Dom. They're 9 years old to maybe 14, maybe.
Right.
And I'm watching these kids, and I'm watching them argue. And number one, they had a grasp of the issue of the Electoral College far better than any Democrat in Congress. 1,000 times better than the bartender AOC. And they're doing this, and they're doing it, and they have their little sport coat on and they're tied. Now, I grew up in a rough neighborhood outside of Chicago, kind of neighborhood where you didn't really want to let on. You were smart. You might get a pencil busted over your head. So you understand, right? Very similar probably to where you were. And I thought to myself at that time, these kids have never been bullied. They have never been intimidated. They have never been made to conform to the opinion of other kids. And I thought to myself, I really do believe we've been doing education in this country completely wrong. Because only the people that love you the most can really teach you how to reason, how to think, and how to understand. Only the people that love you can do that. Now, when you were a teacher, it was different. There was a different character among the Americans in general. But when you turn a kid over at 18 to go into college, he's going to be around some very, very bad things. And if he doesn't have the security of his judgment, can he, in essence, tolerate those bad temptations and that intimidation from peers? And I think no. I think if I could do anything over again, I would have homeschooled. I don't care about the money. I would have gave up the money to do that for the kids. Now, I got lucky, and most people hopefully do get lucky when it comes to the character of their kid. But is it possible that we have been doing it exactly wrong? And the reason it's so bad in the inner city and the rest of it is they don't, at that certain point, the people are told this is the best way. And they may have the best intentions, but you're turning your children over to Lord of the Flies. What do you think?
Well, exactly. One of the number one reasons why parents want school choice is some of what you just talked about, physical safety. I was in schools where I had a kid throw a desk at me, things of that nature. And Sean, at the end of the day, the teacher in those kinds of environments is just hanging on. They're not advancing kids or thinking about it. So a lot of teachers are not the problem here. It's the teacher union said, the activism, the Randy Weingarten, the Becky Pringles. We saw it during COVID. COVID has helped to explode, though, parents demanding this. And the other thing I'd note is it is incredibly diverse, the people coming into charter schools, things of that nature. And what I try to do with old school, new school, next school is chronicle all this. My guest was the head of a union that has 40,000 workers in Philadelphia, big-time Democrat, but big-time supporter of school choice. And that really, every time he comes on with me and talks about it, there's tremendous blowback.
It really, it's interesting. And you know what I reflect on in history when I was a kid, we were lucky enough to be taught by very smart people back in the 70s and 80s. And what they would do is they would expose us to the letters and the communication of people of whatever era we were discussing. So when we were talking about the Civil War, we would read the letters that are right. Available for anybody to see between the Civil War soldiers and their family. And it was amazing to see the intellect of these kids back in the Civil War, sometimes they were 16, 14, 15. They were actual soldiers. And they were writing about the nuances of what their thought patterns were, of what they thought they were fighting for. And it came to me, I believe that in the 19th century, in the mid 1800s, the kids were more educated than they are certainly in Chicago and probably all around the country. I think the quality of education with far less technology, nothing. They had to think and reason, far greater than today. But yet these are the people who tell us what progress is. Isn't that another part of controlling the perception of things, is to control the reality of where we are? People are dumber in 2025 than they've ever been in this country.
When I was still teaching, I just did a general test of kids who were graduating. We were in South Jersey, near the Jersey Shore, and they told me Atlantic City was touched by the Pacific Ocean. Leonardo da Vinci was a mob dude. I mean, you're graduating high school, and these are the kind of responses. And, I would tell you probably have heard, I don't know if you've heard of him, E.D. Hirsch, Hirsch, wrote the 3,000 things that any American should know. And there was tremendous blowback, too much memorization and all that. It's things like any port in a storm, Bible Belt. If you don't know those references, his point and my point is, you really can't read. You're just reading words. All these cultural references are the thing that give meaning to this and pushes your ideation forward. And I pitch E.D. Hirsch every chance I get.
Well, you know what else is fascinating? When you talked about Randy Weingarten, that's Chicago's very own. And most people don't realize she was a substitute teacher for one day, and she got a full pension. One day. She got a full teacher's pension. So when you talk about the level of corruption, my fallback is they're teaching revisionist history of not just American actual beauty and the principles of Americanism and why the country is the youngest and the richest with the highest quality of life, but they're cultivating kids to accept the political frauds that they represent. So the history books, as you know, they sign contracts with the socialists. The name is eluding me right now, with the legendary socialist from World War II who wrote all the history books and taught the kids. Howard Zinn.
Yeah.
And what he did to the education system single-handedly with cooperation of teachers union, I don't know how many generations it'll take to get rid of that. But is the best way through school choice, or is the best way through homeschool with AI?
You've opened up one of the most exciting things out there, the homeschool with AI. And I think this comes back to, and that's a great point, Sean, it comes back to knowing your own kid. It comes back to experimentation with safety. You can try a charter school. You can try homeschooling with AI. I homeschooled one son when he was at the high school level, and it worked for him. The other son was very academically oriented. He was in a Catholic school and got scholarships, et cetera. So it depends upon your child. And this whole thing with school choice gets back to the bigger issue, which is parental rights. And I know the Chicago teachers have said they are the people that are masters of education, not the parents. That's what it always comes down to.
Well, you know what else, too, is beautiful about the perspective I'm assuming you bring to your show and what you're doing now. When I was in school, I would have clearly been diagnosed with ADHD, ADD. And the difference in what was called curious or overactive or bored, that was my argument with kids when they tried to do that with my kids. My kid doesn't have a disease. The teacher sucks. So that was my answer. But the other side of the coin is you were actually practicing when kids were not on these mind-altering drugs. And that always gets left out of the argument. We have a tremendous amount of financial incentive for public schools and private to diagnose children with behavioral disorders when the reality is the teachers themselves are not reaching the intellectual needs to keep that child engaged.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's RFK Jr., and a lot of this comes in. I mean, there are many other layers before we get to that. But he has talked about psychoactive drugs, Ritalin, things of that nature. And I saw that play out very, very much in the last few years that I was teaching in my master's in special ed. And I saw how that road, to your point, was changed to go down that. Once that happens, then parents are really adrift. They're always trying to deal with something that has side effects and is not the right way to go. Most kids do not have any of that. Although, I might add, talk show hosts such as you and me, quirkiness is what we have, and that's a big element, I think, to help.
Well, well, the funny thing is, too, you hoist the parents by their own emotion. You take advantage of the parents' not just ignorance of the situation because they're busy working, but of the love of their children, and they themselves become a conduit to turn a kid into somebody who is always on a drug, and then accepts the idea that a pill is the fix, rather than what we used to get as kids who sloughed off. Either you got sent to the principal's office, and my principal saved my life. His name's Bill Bright, fantastic man, and he would tell you, "You're going to pay attention, or I'll kick the hell out of you in the parking lot." That's how it was. But it worked. And that's the broader point, Dom. It worked. And they went away from that. And now you've got kids who become parents themselves. That's the reality, right? My generation, your parents, if not grandparents by this stage of the game. And now you're telling your kid, well, maybe they have ADHD. So that entire system needs to be knocked off track. And do you think that there are enough people in this movement, in your podcast movement, what you're going to be telling is to make the parents themselves be reluctant to turn this inquisitive kid, this empty vessel, who could be utilized in so many different ways if it wasn't for the fact that we're doping them down ourselves?
Well, it comes back to your point, which is this. If the option to the parents, be it whatever, their own homeschooling or charters or a private school, parochial school, if they don't deliver what you and I are talking about, then parents are going to move on. So their whole ethos is to deliver that, to figure out each child. And I'm not saying, I'm talking about tough love, reaching him in that way, hitting him with something that would take a young Sean that was interested in history, something like that, and coming up with direction. Public schools have to do that. They're the biggest monopoly in the world. They do not have to reach those kids. Their whole mission then is to just keep the ball rolling. They're not going to get paid more. Merit pay is out, except rare circumstances. So, yeah, Sean, I agree with you. Their mission is to keep things quiet, no problems, but not to get to the heart of reaching kids.
How early? I think this is crucially important to understand why we're the youngest and the richest country with the highest quality of life. It's not about the money. It's about the principle of the Enlightenment. And when you reflect on these intellects like John Locke or Montesquieu, whoever you pick, I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, right? You could go back to Newton, and you understand the brilliance of these people who had no access to any technology. Isn't that something you should teach kids very, very early on so they never feel helpless when they understand that we're living in a country that's a place, but more importantly, it's a concept. And all of the swindlers you will encounter in your life that tell you to be a socialist or a communist or a collectivist of any kind, they're all wrong. And if you have that knowledge from third grade, from first grade, second grade, I don't care where it is, you can't be wooed by the utopian lies of statism.
Yeah, exactly. And parents, I know better parents, they look for opportunities. You probably did this at a third or fourth grade level to say, all right, everybody's going to be equal here, even though one kid is slopping off, even though one kid did nothing. Look for opportunities. I did that with classes, various scenarios that you can set up, Sean, and prove the point. The reason socialism works a bit, it goes away for a while, and we're seeing it in New York, and then it comes back every few years, and people think, aha, I discovered something that gives me life, the affordability, those kinds of things, and then we're off to another spasm until it fails, sometimes tragically. It goes away for a while, and then it's hot again.
Well, I love the idea that you're tackling this. I really do, because it's going to be something that is a vehicle for people to go to the podcast, old school, new school, next school. What's the best way to keep an eye on it? I mean, I know you're a radio show host. I understand that, but what's the best way for people to get this kind of knowledge and information so that they can spread it if they're thinking about homeschooling or making an argument against a fascistic public school tyranny like Illinois?
Well, I would say go to old school, new school, next school. You can email me there. I answer all parents. I'll tell you the ones that I know in the Chicago area, groups that are formed around that. And I got to say, Sean, they got to listen to you, too. That would be my advice. I'm really, this is one of the better discussions I've had in talk radio, and I hear from your producer you do it every night. So
Oh,
great
I do.
stuff.
Well, thank you, Dom. And you know what's fascinating is when you see these frauds, these Democrats in Chicago, how they throw around the term Nazi. And it's almost insulting that they don't start off with what it really means. It's the National Socialist Worker Party. And they throw around fascism, which I'm half Italian. And my grandfather from the Italian side, exactly, the handsome half, how he hated Mussolini and how he had still destroyed, and the kind of devastation it leads. And you see these trust fund babies like J.B. Pritzker, never worked a day in his life, butter hands, never even dressed himself. And he calls people who are arguing for the reestablishment of propertyism. Really, that's the problem, right? Capitalism, that's a Karl Marx word. Propertyism over your own life, your own decision. You're not obligated to anybody. And they call this man who's trying to reestablish that and enforce laws a Nazi. It's just intellectually insane, aside from the fact you're trying to invoke violence. So that really has to be tackled from an intellectual standpoint, and it has to be pointed to kids, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And even more so in a subtle way for what you and I do, the fascism stuff. I mean, that's a very fluid, nuanced term here that we're dealing with in a lot of ways. But all it means is if you support Trump vaguely or you're a conservative, now you're a fascist. The Nazi thing, not to give up on this with all the violence that's out there, to see Zach Bryan, the country star now, go down that road, go on that side, attacking ICE and the cops, to see Bad Bunny at Super Bowl. This is a constant provocation of this. But I would tell you, Pritzker is particularly annoying. You and I know the background. The dad was the ultimate capitalist.
Yeah, cross-eyed, though. The father was cross-eyed, which way it's hard to find in a picture. He looks stupid. The other thing, Dom, you know, the throw around fascism, these are all the Democrats that took you away from your business, locked you away from your mother when she was dying, forced you to put the vaccine in your arm. They're calling people fascists. The irony is rich. It could only happen if people are miseducated, right?
And, Sean, I would make the point, when I think of fascism versus Nazism, I think of these petty tyrants that we had during, you know, they're not putting in people in jail, whatever, but they shut down businesses.
Yeah.
From New Jersey on national TV said you can get alcohol because alcoholics need it, but you can't go to church because of COVID. They kept the liquor stores open. On and on and on. The sheer pettiness of the oppression versus outright oppression. That's what I think of when I think of an American form of fascism.
Yeah, I just remember my grandfather celebrating Mussolini dangling from the light pole. I never understood the girlfriend, though. The poor thing, she was just trying to make him happy. Dom Giordano, thank you so much, really, for making time for me. Anytime you need anything, you have an open door here, okay?
Well, same with me, Sean. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Marxists, socialists, and communists are not welcome on the Sean Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.
You need a construction company, but who?
Call Croscom.
A construction company you can trust that shares your Christian and